Welcome back. One Bills Live, Thursday afternoon. John Murphy, Steve Tasker, both working from home. The Seneca studio remains closed and on radio coverage only today. Yesterday, the news was sad when it came out that one of the great all-time Buffalo Bills, linebacker Mike Stratton, passed away at his home in Tennessee. He was an all-time AFL, second-team all-time AFL performer. He was a six-time AFL All-Star. He's a member of the Bills Wall of Fame. We went to another Wall of Fame member to get some perspective on Mike Stratton. Happy to be on the line with the great Booker Edgerson joining us. Hello, Booker. It's John Murphy and Steve Tasker here on the phone line. Thanks for coming on.
Good afternoon, guys. Good to be with you.
Book, thanks for coming on. I got to ask you, too, when you heard the news about Mike, what can you go back to tell us what you remember about him as a teammate and as a player?
Yes. Well, I came here in 1962 right along with Mike and Tom Sistak and Carl Sharon as a rookie, and Mike was an end. He was a receiver, and but he wasn't fast enough to beat out the other receivers and everything, and compete with him. So Saban turned him into a linebacker, and that's where his career started, and that's where it ended as a linebacker. He was one of the greatest linebackers in the Buffalo Bills history.
Yeah, what kind of locker room? When he came in with at the same time you did, you guys were part of those great championship teams in the '60s. Tell us a little bit about why could that's unheard of in today's NFL. I mean, you just can't switch positions from one side of the ball to the other. Plus, go from an outside skill guy to down inside in the box. How big was Mike when he played, and what allowed him to make the switch of that magnitude?
Well, obviously, Lou Saban saw something in him, and Joe Collier saw something in him to see that he would be able to be flexible enough to play defense. And the only area in defense he would be able to play would be linebacker, because he was fast, he was quick. I shouldn't say he was fast, but he was quick, and he understood the defensive alignment because he played defense in college. You know, back in those days, you had to play both ways more or less. So making that transition. Looking at today's players, making that transition would be very hard. But back then, making that transition would not be as hard as it is today because they did play both ways back at that time.
Oh, I got you. I didn't realize that. That's something I didn't realize he had done. That is a long time ago. Did you play both ways?
I sure did. And
what did you play?
Teams too.
What position did you play?
I was a running back and a defensive back, and also special teams.
Yeah, and I know that at that time, I know it was pretty common. Everybody played special teams at some point or other in their career. You're no different than that. Did Stratton play a lot of special teams as well?
Well, yes, we had to play special teams. We only had 33 players on the roster back in those days, so. You was on the punt team, you was on the punt return team, you was on the kickoff team, you was on the kickoff return team, and you had to play the position of linebacker or defensive back. So it was a very intense time of playing football back in those days because you had to be very versatile and durable.
And in the years that followed, both you and Mike had so much success for the team. You were both put on the Wall of Fame. Mike is famous for the hit heard round the world on Keith Lincoln. Incidentally, as well, Keith Lincoln ended up playing for the Buffalo Bills during the end of his career, and Mike played for the Chargers. Is that not right? At the end of his career?
Isn't that ironic? That
yeah.
Switch teams, But when you talk about the hit heard around the world, a lot of people have asked me about it. What did it look like? Well, unfortunately, I did not see the hit because I was busy trying to cover my man doing that play, and by the time I knew what had happened, the play was over with. So I didn't get a chance to see the play until that Tuesday at our team meeting when they was playing the films back to us.
I'm not sure. I think Murph is going to get in. We're having trouble with his mic. I got to ask you one more thing about that. When you went on the wall, when you saw Mike Stratton go on the Wall of Fame, what were your thoughts about so many years after you guys played? You went on in 2010. Mike Stratton was recognized. Of course, Billy Shaw got into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Give us a quick synopsis of some of the great players that Mike Stratton, Billy Shaw, yourself, some of the other great players that were on those 60s teams that maybe fans of this day and age aren't as familiar with?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you had John Tracy, who was one of the linebackers that played right along with Mike, and Harry Jacobs, who is currently a resident of Western New York, Erie County. Ryan McDowell was another one, and Jim Donaway, Tom Sistak, who is on the wall, Tom Day, who was one of the great outstanding defensive ends. He also played offense at the beginning of his career. Then you had Butch Bird, George Sims, who was on the wall, Haygood Clark, and Gene Sykes. All those guys were coming along during that time. Albert DeBinion is another individual during that time. So we had a lot of guys. Jack Kemp, obviously. Jack Kemp was always there, and Darryl LaMonica. So there's a lot of guys that was back in those days that the fans was very excited about, because during that time we did have a great team for about 4 years. And unfortunately, we wasn't able to get to the Super Bowl like you guys did, but we did play in the championship games, and we won.
Yeah, you did. You won the 64, and the next year you got beat, I think, by the Kansas City Chiefs to go to Super Bowl I with Len Dawson and Otis Taylor and all of those guys. What do you remember about the atmosphere around the AFL just before the merger took place, when the two leagues were going hot and heavy? What do you remember about the atmosphere around the AFL in relationship to the other league, the NFL?
Well, we always felt, at least I always felt, that we was just as comparable to them as they was to us. We was the MVP. We was the MVP, TV, fast and playing. We passed a lot of balls, and we didn't run a whole lot. And the NFL, they did a lot of running, but not a lot of passing. So the comparison is that if we played them at that particular time, the AFL would be on the winning side because of the fast game that we played. However, it proved wrong in the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl, or the World Championship, they called it back then. The Kansas City did not live up to the expectations that we all thought that they would do in that first championship game.
I'm trying to I was going to give Murph a chance. I think we're having technical difficulties with John Murphy's mic. I got to ask you this, too. We're talking with Booker Edgerson in remembering the Bills Wall of Famer Mike Stratton. Obviously, Booker, a member of the Bills Wall of Fame as well, members of the 64-65 AFL championship teams. And we're talking about how this game has changed. And it seems stark when you go back all the way to the 64-65 games. And we're 50 years into the future for those games, even more so. What do you think when you watch the games today, Book? And you and we've talked off and on for the last 2 decades and longer since I've been in Buffalo. What are the most striking differences? And you mentioned the 33 guys on the team as a big difference for me. What are some of the other stark differences you see today that you really wish you would have had maybe back in the 64-65 days?
There's so many situations there, but the equipment, obviously the equipment is one of the biggest points that we did not have. Practicing, we did not have. We did not have the training opportunity that they have today. When you're looking at 33 players, as opposed to today, you got 53 players, so you're talking 20 players different. Have the opportunity. You got special guys playing special teams. They come in for one play and go back out, where back then it wasn't no come in for one play and go back out. You came in and played 4 downs, or you hope to get it 3 downs and out. One of the big things is that the training is so much different now than it was back then. We had to have jobs on the off season, so we didn't have the opportunity to work out and get in condition to come in and play during the training camp. We had to come to training camp to get into condition to play the game. So those are some of the striking differences as to back then as to opposed to now, is that that's one of the great things about, our NFL Players Association dealing with the collective bargaining contract is that they're providing a lot of safety factors and for the current ball players and future ball players, which I am so glad to see because, I love the game of football, and I'm quite sure Steve, you and all the other guys who have played the game of football love it and don't want to see it to go away. The only way we're gonna save this is by having a safer game of football for the next 20 years, the next 100 years, or whatever it may be. So that's the difference between 1962, 63, 64, 65 as to 2018, 2019, 2020.
Well, Booker, you are a man of grace and dignity because you didn't mention anything about the $20 million difference there is in the paychecks either. That's you're right. There are a lot of differences in the game, and thanks to guys like you and the rest of the 64, 65 AFL championship teams, come to the financial gains that the players of today have made. I gotta tell you, we appreciate it. The guys in the 90s appreciated your the foundation you guys laid back in those decades, just like the guys these days appreciate the league and what it has grown into. It's because of guys like you, Mike Stratton, the guy we remember today, the day after he passed away. Booker, thanks so much for coming on with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.